All right, you guys, welcome to today's first main session. It is called Channeling Our Desire to Serve into Practical Action. And we have our lovely speaker, Sheikh Rami Nsour, and I'm going to read a little bit about him. Sheikh Rami spent a number of years in the West African country of Mauritania, where he studied at some of the most foremost Islamic colleges. He completed studies in various subjects, Islamic studies, and received traditional teaching license, ijazat, to transmit what he learned. He has translated traditional Islamic texts, done extensive spiritual counseling and public speaking, and teaches regularly both in person and online. He co-founded the Taiba Foundation, which is the first organization to offer a distance learning program in Islamic education to incarcerated men and women in the United States, and that now has served over 6,000 Muslims in prison. He has extensive experience in curriculum development, specifically with character. Sheikh Rami holds a BA in Human Development with a focus on early childhood and a master's in Educational Psychology. Sheikh Rami resides in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and 3 children, and many of you guys may know Dr. Rania Awad, who is his wife, mashallah.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Assalamu'alaykum wa rahmatullah. I want to thank everybody who was taking part in organizing this amazing conference and inviting me to partake in it, and thank everyone who is here to attend. It's always great to see this much energy, especially on a weekend, early cold morning, but alhamdulillah, everybody is, or at least most people are channeling their desire into practical action by coming to this conference to better themselves and better those around them. And that's what I wanted to speak a little bit about, is how can we better those around us, the world around us, while not neglecting ourselves and not neglecting our identity and not compromising who we are. How do we do that? In this age that we live in, we have to realize that there's not only a movement towards focusing on the self, me, right? Like the selfie concept or the selfie philosophy. It's all about me and what I can do for me. There's actually, over the last 100 years, there's been an organized effort to push people towards serving the self. If you're interested in learning just a little bit about this, there's a documentary called A Century of the Self. And it's about a man named Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he is the father of propaganda in the US. Does anybody know the modern term for propaganda? Public relations. So you know the public PR? It used to be called propaganda. Well, after World War I, people didn't like the term propaganda because it had a negative connotation. So Edward Bernays came up with the idea or the term public relations, because it makes it easier to digest. He also did another thing, and we just had breakfast at the hotel, and so this is a prime example of his work over almost 100 years ago. What is the quintessential all-American breakfast? What would you say? Bacon and eggs, right? Well, that's not what it was before Edward Bernays. Do you know what it used to be? Like up until about the 1920s, tea and toast. Tea and toast. Now, it's not the healthiest breakfast, right? But it's a lot better than bacon and eggs or sausage and eggs. So what happened is that the egg industry and the meat industry came to Edward Bernays and says, how can we change the perception of what the all-American breakfast is? And he had a propaganda campaign or a PR marketing campaign, and he changed that. But the reason I mention that is that the title of the documentary is A Century of the Self, the nefs, ourselves, focused on ourselves. And so there's this push to focus on ourselves, and whatever desire you need, go ahead and get it without any controls. Well, what happens when you have an industrialization of meat? We all know what happens in the farms. Everybody's seen those videos and so forth, right? There's then been this push that, oh, you want to have meat at every meal multiple times, which is not natural if you look at human history and what animals can produce. And so now there's this industrialization of meat production to satisfy people's selves, their selfish desire. I want meat, I gotta have meat, and so let's coop the chickens up in a 1-by-1 cage. Let's all of what they do. So that's to satisfy the desires of the self. They've manipulated the earth. They manipulated milk production, meat production, egg production, whatever it might be, and they've channeled their desires. They've channeled their desires into practical action. They're like, our desire, we want meat, eggs, milk, this, that, and the other, and they've channeled their engineering, everything to fulfill that. In the Islamic tradition, and if you look in the Quran, there's 2 words for desire. One is shahwa, and the other is hawa. Shahwa, you could spell it in English, transliterate S-H-A-W-A, and the other one is hawa, H-A-W-A. So when you hear desire in the Quran, is it a negative thing or a positive thing? Well, negative, right? But it actually could have both elements to it. The negative element of desire is hawa. And that's what Allah tells us in the Quran, control that. And once we control our desires, and by desires I don't just mean like desires of the flesh. Desire is anything you want as an individual, anything you want. Once you control that, it's a shahwa. So for example, if you got up in the morning, you wanted coffee. Oh, alhamdulillah, you got coffee. That was channeling the desire, but it wasn't towards something that's haram. Now, if you made it, and I just learned this term, and my mom's side of the family, they're Irish, so I was interested to learn this term. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but they called it Irish coffee. Anybody ever heard of Irish coffee? So they spike it with some alcohol. So it's coffee, but it's got the alcohol in it. And so now the person has attained their desire, what they want, but it's now gone from being a shahwa, something that Allah has made permissible, the coffee, to something now that has something tainting that. So our goal is to figure out, okay, we have these personal desires of what we want in life, but how can we make sure that it lines up with what Allah wants for us? And so to keep our desires in the realm of shahwa and not allow it to go into hawa. The first thing that we have to remember is that our primary duty in life is to protect ourselves as individuals. And we see this in the Quran, and this is very important when we talk about action, like I want to do something for the world around me. Well, to do something for the world around me, you first have to take care of yourself. And I'm sure you've all heard of this term self-care, right? So self-care is important. There's a certain level that's an obligation. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. So you have to take care of yourself, and this is what Allah tells us in the Quran, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ. Save yourselves and then your family. So it doesn't say, save yourselves or save the world. That's later. You first have to save yourselves and then your family. It's just like when you get on the airplane, and if you're actually paying attention to the flight attendants, who actually pays attention to their directions? Okay, mashallah. Good. Now they have to have all those interesting, funny videos to get people to focus on the directions. And every once in a while, I'll pull out the cars because, la qaddar Allah, God forbid, you might actually be in one of those situations. There was one funny video one time where they said, and remove the exit door, to make, if it's a water landing, remove the exit door and make sure to place the door on the seat behind you. And me and some of the other ones were like, place the door on the seat behind us. One guy said, he's like, I'm going to chuck that thing into the water and you can bill me because I'm getting out of this plane. I'm not thinking about place the door behind me on the seat behind me. But when they say those oxygen masks drop, who's the first person you put it on? Your kid? Yourself. You put it on yourself. Because if you can't breathe, and especially in that situation, human beings, we will panic. We are designed to panic, and you go into the fight or flight or freeze mode, you will panic. So you need to make sure you have that oxygen coming to you. Even though you want oxygen for those children next to you, you have to make sure that you're getting enough oxygen. So that's a really good principle to remember. That's as an image. It's the same principle in the Quran. قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِكُمْ. Take care of yourselves and then your family. So whatever it is that you do, Whatever it is, whether it's working on this conference, whether it's getting up for prayer, whether it's going to the masjid, whether it's feeding the homeless, taking care of your family, whatever it is that you choose to do, you have to make sure that your primary concern is yourself. And that's not being selfish, it's being practical. That's the way God created us, that we cannot help other people unless we're helping ourselves. So that's the first thing. And there's a lot of literature and discussions and that you can look online, but keep in mind this concept of self-care. Always take care of yourself so that you can properly take care of other people. Then we have to look at what is our circle of influence and our circle of concern. As Muslims, where's our circle of influence? Our circle of concern. Who are we concerned about helping? Everyone, right? Every human being on the face of this earth. What else is our circle of concern? Besides human beings? Living things, right? What else? The climate, the environment, right? So just the world around us, the world, the animals, the human beings. We're even concerned for the spiritual beings, right? We believe in angels. We believe in jinn. The Prophet ﷺ, there's even literature on how we should interact to respect the jinn. The spiritual creatures that we can't see. We're made from clay, they're made from fire, they live amongst us. He taught us, there's etiquette on how we interact with them. And there's whole books written on the subject, and it's one of the most popular subjects, especially at camps, right? Jinn. And there's a book by Imam Suyuti, maybe next time at the Mina camp we can have that as a session, right? Imam Suyuti has an entire book on just every interaction that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had with the jinn creatures. And if we had time, I could tell some jinn stories there. I've collected them over the years. You want those? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's channel our desire into practical action. But the point is we're concerned even about them. We're concerned about the angels. How many of you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you, when you've done something, you've thought, oh, I wonder what those angels that are next to me, what are they thinking? What are they doing? Would they appreciate the fact that I'm doing this or that I'm not doing that? So we're concerned with even them because they have feelings as well. They're not like humans, but they do have feelings, and there's things that they don't like and there's things that they do like. So our circle of concern is huge. But imagine if you woke up this morning and you're like, I want to help every human on the face of the earth, every animal on the face of the earth, protect the earth, and I also want to consider the jinn and the angels. What would happen if a person realized the magnitude of that? They would collapse and they would probably go into non-action. So you have to realize, okay, we have the big picture, which is our circle of concern. We're concerned. Now we have to bring it back in to see what can I influence. And now that's an individual journey that each one of us have to make to figure out what is it that I can do and what is it that I want to do and what is it that I should do. Can, want, and should do. And then that'll help you figure out what is your circle of influence. So what can you do? You have to be real. You have to be practical. Think about what are things that you are able to do. But even more importantly than the can is what you want to do. One of the hadith, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that's really impacted me and helped guide me in actually choosing what it is that I do in life and thinking about others is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that people, الناس معادن كمعادن الذهب والفضة. People are like ores, like the ores of gold and silver. So he's telling us each one of you is like gold or silver. خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. The best of them before Islam are the best of them after Islam if they gain understanding. Fiqh. Now fiqh, usually when people hear the word fiqh in Islam, terminology, they're thinking about like the rules of prayer, the rules of wudu. But what fiqh in Arabic means is understanding. That means really understanding yourself. Understanding your strengths, understanding your weaknesses, understanding where you need to be purified, and then work towards that. So, as an example of this, there were two Umars that the Prophet ﷺ used to make dua, used to pray to Allah that they come to Islam. Sorry, not two Umars, there were two people. There were two people that the Prophet ﷺ used to make dua that they come to Islam. One of them was Umar ibn al-Khattab, before he was Muslim, right? He wanted him to become Muslim. Who was the other one? Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl, one of the most ardent enemies of Islam. But he saw something in him that he said, he's got something. Because every human being has something. And just like a person who goes out to mine in the mountains, if they see a mineral or a metal, they're like, okay, that's not just a piece of, ugly looking dirt. There's something there. I can take it. I can refine it. I mean, how do you think we power these things? And we also have to think about, Central Africa and the Congo and what our impact is on, using these smart devices and computers and so forth, and how the mineral extraction from earth and pitting people against each other, what is it doing? But that's a separate subject. The point is that there's minerals in our phones right now that used to be in the depths of the earth, but when they were in the depths of the earth, they couldn't benefit anything else. They had to be extracted, they had to be refined, they had to be placed with other things, and then their potential, maybe not their full potential, but a fuller potential of just sitting in the dirt or sitting in a mountain. So each one of us has potential, and we have to look at every single person around us, even our enemies. We have to look at the potential of who they can be. Because those two people that the Prophet ﷺ used to make dua for, supplicate for, they were some of the heads of the enemies against the Prophet. To the point that Umar, on the day that he converted to Islam, what did he start that day doing in the morning? He wanted to kill the Prophet. He wanted to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ. He was the patriot. He was like a patriot of the Arabs. If they had trucks and flags that they could fly in the back. Who's seen those? Like the trucks with the flags on the back of the trucks, right? And the stickers, and all that. That would have been Umar. He was a patriot of the Arab. He would have been Quraysh, and they're challenging our tribalocracy, and they don't like our freedom, and all of those slogans. That was Umar. And yet the Prophet saw something in him and wanted him to become Islam, and that goodness was extracted. So when we go out in the world, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the potential in ourselves and how to pull that out. And then we're also looking in the potential around us, in the people, in anybody. But to go back to the idea of figuring out what's your medal. What is it that you want? What can you do? And this will really maximize your impact when you talk about serving others, because part of our deen is worship, right? Refining ourselves, worshiping. But part of our religion is also serving other people. The second pillar, the second action after salah, just look at this. Well, there's 5 pillars. The first one is the shahada, belief. You don't even have to do anything. Sorry, what was that? Okay. Oh, Joe, okay. Where was I? The second pillar, yes. So you can be a Muslim just by belief alone. If you have the shahada, la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that's what makes you Muslim. Even if you don't practice. And this is a message that we have to tell people. There's somebody I was talking about just this week where her husband actually has that belief of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, but he feels I can't become a Muslim unless I do actions. No, actions is separate than faith. The first pillar, the most important pillar, is La ilaha illallah. There's only one God and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That's what makes us Muslim. Then comes prayer, your personal devotion to Allah. What's after prayer? Is it fasting? Is it Hajj? What is it? Zakat. Giving of our wealth, giving of our time. And every time we see the order in the Quran for prayer, we see right after it what? Does it say pray and make your Hajj? Pray and read Quran? Pray and fast? Pray and do this? Pray and do that? No, it says pray and give zakat. Give from your zakat. And the principle behind zakat is not just figuring out the bare minimum. Okay, if I have $100,000 in the bank, I pay 2.5%. No, you do that. But the principle is that anything that Allah has given you, you want to purify. And so in our tradition, the scholars have mentioned just examples. They say, if you're a poet, and I know yesterday they had the spoken word, right? So any poets, raise your hand, the poets in this room. People who are poetically inclined. Do you know what your zakat is for poetry? Praise of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As poets, that's your zakat. Because Allah has given you a gift of poetry, so talk about whatever you want, but at least reserve a little bit of your skill to praise the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Praise the Prophet. That's your zakat. If you're a teacher, any teachers in here? Raise your hand if you're a teacher, you want to go into teaching. Oh, it's a hard field. I know it because I'm a teacher as well. Okay, our zakat of knowledge, if you've actually, sorry, I got to take that back. It's not just the teachers. Anybody who's studied anything, the zakat of acquiring knowledge is teaching it. And I want to speak to this side of the room. How many brothers, and I'm going to put the brothers on the spot. How many of you guys are involved in your local masjid, at the Sunday schools, or at youth halaqas? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Now keep those up. Sisters, how many are you involved? How are involved? That looks, I'm just going to, okay. Does it look like equal, or is it more on this side? Okay, usually it's more on the sister side. I want to see more brothers give back to their masajid, especially for the young brothers coming up after us. But give out from, like, if you're coming to this conference, you're benefiting from MSA. I'm going to say this: the zakat of benefiting from MSA is giving to Mina. All those who have given back to Mina, raise your hand. Okay, Mina. Oh, see, now I got it. Okay, keep your hands up high. All right, so the Mina people, who knows about Mina? M-Y-N-A, Muslim Youth of North America. All right, now get out your phones. This is permission to use that. Look up Mina, M-Y-N-A. Look up Mina, and if you've benefited from MSA, here's your zakat. Your zakat is you have to give back to Mina. And that doesn't mean like, oh, I'll make a donation or something. It means about go be a counselor at one of their camps, at one of their programs, learn about what they're doing. Do you like that plug? All right. I'm going to end up here. So find out what your niche is, what you really are passionate about. Because I guarantee you, every single one of you in here has something that you're passionate about in life. So figure out what you're passionate about, what you want to do. Anybody in here, they're really passionate about saving the whales? And I'm not just talking about a bumper sticker. I'm just, okay, save the whales. What about, I don't know, something else? Save the, what's that? Turtles! What about the turtles? Okay. The koalas, yes. Yeah, the koalas are really getting hurt. Oh, by the way, as a side note, we're watching those bushfires. Our belief as Muslims, we're talking about climate change and so forth. Our belief as Muslims is that the spiritual state of human beings has more of an impact on the physical earth around us than what we do physically. So it's not just carbon emissions, and it's not just our carbon footprint, and it's not just the chemicals and all of the industry and burning coal and fossil fuels. That's not the only thing hurting the earth. It starts with spiritual diseases. In the Quran it says, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادِ, corruption has spread throughout the earth and the ocean. What? بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, because of what people have done. And where does their action start? In the heart. So what we as Muslims, the message we have to say is, yes, you have to be conscious of what you're doing, but you also have to be conscious of the diseases of the heart and working to purify the heart. And if we're purifying our hearts, it's going to help the earth around us. But the point is that every single one of us is passionate about something, whether it's the whales or the turtles or the trees or homeless or the orphans or whatever it might be, or American Muslims for Palestine. Anybody here from that group? They have a table outside. Everybody's passionate about something. Mass incarceration, mental health, whatever it might be. Find out what your passion is, and then after making sure that you established your prayer, now start figuring out how to give your zakat and what you're capable of without hurting yourself. And this is where I'll end. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to split his day into thirds. 1/3 for the people. The community, serving whatever time he had. 1/3 was for the people. 1/3 was for himself and his family. And people used to ask him, because after he would serve the people, he would lead them in prayer. He would give advice. He would teach. He would solve disputes. He would lead military campaigns. He would help people. He would help animals. And then he goes home. He goes inside his house. People don't know what he's doing. So they used to come to his wife afterwards, Aisha radiallahu anha, and they would say, what does he do at home? And he says, he does what men do. He does what men do. He serves his family. He mends his shoes. He milks the goat. He sews up torn clothes. He helps his family. And that's one of the things that we want to say, is that when we talk about helping the family, or community service, we have to remember helping the family. His community service did not prevent him from serving his family, because he knows, and he's leading by example, our primary concern is ourselves. We take care of ourselves, then we take care of our families, and then by extension, then we can start serving the community. But we don't, and this is a good metric, if our service to others ever affects service to ourselves, self-care, or taking care of our family, then we have an imbalance. We're moving from shahwa, like following the desires, to hawa, to vain, like we're doing the same thing, but now it's becoming, the ruling is changing. So somebody's out there feeding the homeless, helping the orphans, but they're neglecting their home. Say two people are out there, one person is feeding, and they're both in the same project, helping the orphans. One is taking care of his or her family duties and their own self duties, and the other one is not. They're both doing the same thing. One is in a state of sin, one is in a state of worship of Allah. But because of the duties that they're fulfilling. And so the Prophet ﷺ balanced 1/3 for the community, 1/3 for himself and his family, and 1/3 for his Lord, meaning prayer. So we have to remember that we don't want to neglect our own personal devotion. We have to keep up whatever routine is in your life. You have to keep that up and keep building on that. Prayer, recitation, reflection, fikr, dhikr, reciting Quran, learning. We have to maintain a personal devotion so that we can serve our families and that we can serve the community beyond. There's a saying and it changes from culture to culture. In Jordan, my father's from Jordan, they say, Ibn Skafi Hafi. Anybody ever heard that? Ibn Skafi Hafi. Who is the Skafi? The cobbler, the person who fixes people's shoes. And the counterpart of that saying in English is, the cobbler's son, what? Has no shoes. So we have to remember that. The cobbler's son has no shoes. In our service to others, say that cobbler, he's figured out, he's like, I love shoes. And you know there's people like that, right? They're, whatever, it's the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, they get into, they're like, oh yeah, their little, their world, and they start talking about it. You know what I'm talking about, right? They get into whatever expertise they have or passion they have, they start talking about it like, wow, you really love your field. And so the cobbler, maybe he really loved making shoes. That's what he wanted to do. And then he had the ability and he trained and he fulfilled that potential. And then he started making shoes for everybody else, and then his son has no shoes. And the Egyptians, they say, and the Egyptians can correct me on this, Bab al-Nagar Mkhalla. Yeah? Bab al-Nagar Mkhalla. The door, my wife's Egyptian, so shout out to the Egyptians in the house. Ad-Dunya, the mother of the world. That's what they call themselves in Masr. Rightfully so. There was one of the scholars from Mauritania, he traveled to Egypt, and on the doorway coming into the city, it says, Ya dakhila Misr, O you who is entering Misr. And in those days it was pretty much Cairo and the area around it. Ya dakhila Misr, la ta'jab. Don't be full of yourself, or don't be vain about yourself. Fahuna alfun mithluka. Then here is 1,000 like you. If you're a scholar, there's 1,000 of you here. If you're a thief, there's 1,000. You're a musician, there's 1,000. Don't worry. It was one of the centers of the world, still is. So, and they say Bab al-Nagar, the door of the carpenter has holes in it, or is not on the hinges. Mkhalla is coming off the hinges. Okay, so the door of the carpenter is coming off the hinges. So we don't want to be. And I'll give you this funny story. It's I think there's been a long enough time to where people might not know who it is. But this was in a certain masjid, and they were praying Taraweeh in Ramadan. And you know how the kids are in Ramadan, right? In the masjid, or even any time. You know the kids that just run around, they make tawaf around the masjid, just creating havoc. And you got to step out of their way because it's like, they would make good running backs. But everybody has those kids in the masjid, right? We all have that one uncle or auntie that is loud and obnoxious and will speak, maybe even in the khutbah, right? We all have those people that for the life of them, they cannot follow the rules of parking properly, right? In our masajid. And we all have those runners in the masjid just creating havoc. So these runners were running around the masjid, and one of them took somebody's shoe from the prayer area and he put it in the microwave in the Islamic school. And he cooked it. It stunk up the entire masjid. So one of the mosque leaders picked up the microphone and he stopped Taraweeh. He said, we're going to stop Taraweeh because I'm ad-libbing a little bit. You come here to worship Allah. You're in your devotion and your kids are running around. We also have those people, right? They're the people most focused in prayer, but it's their kids that are just like running around the masjid. And it's just like, how can you do that? How do you maintain so much tranquility and peace in your prayer and your kid is like disturbing everybody else? So he said, how can you come to the masjid and do that? He says, we are not going to continue this prayer until we find the father of this child who didn't watch for his kid, and we take him to account and blah, blah, blah. And guess who it was? It was his kid. I don't know if that's the reason why he left the community, but but anyway, the point is that this person, and he was very active in the community, and mashallah, may Allah bless his soul, and he did a lot, for the community. But I've actually seen this in multiple communities where people spend so much time on projects and their thinking, and part of their thinking process is, I've got to make this world a better place. I've got to make my masjid a better place. I've got to do all of this. Why? So that my family can benefit from it. Well, while you're building up all of this stuff, your kids are growing up, and really at the end of the day, they just want their mom or their dad or their older brother. If you have, I know we're college age and high school age, but you might have younger siblings. And so if you're involved in something, whatever it might be, even MSA, if you're working MSA or memorizing the Quran or teaching or feeding the homeless or taking care of the saving the world, if it's taking you away, 15 minutes, if it's taking you away from developing a strong relationship with your younger siblings, something's going wrong. You got to bring balance back to your life. It's more important to have a strong, healthy relationship with your siblings, with your parents, than to be out there saving the world and not having those the relationship, at that sacrifice. So I'll end with that. We should all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the success, the tawfiq, to figure out what our metal is. What are we, gold, silver? And if we are, because there's properties in gold that you can't get with silver. And even though gold is more precious as a commodity, there's properties in copper, in silver, that you can't find in gold. So it's not just about saying, oh, am I gold or silver? The ulama said the Prophet was just giving these as examples. And by extension, certain people are copper and certain people are aluminum. And it's a metaphor. It's basically find out what's your metal, find out what you need to refine about yourself to bring out your fullest potential. Give that back to your community and the world, but make sure that you're taking care of your family and yourself, both at the devotional level and then also at your, maintaining a balance between your deen and your dunya, and not sacrificing your family and then falling into the cobbler's son who has no shoes, or the sheikh's son who microwaves shoes. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. We'll spend the last 15 minutes. Yes, Maham.
Thank you. I think for a lot of us, we want to our end goal for our careers is to help people. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been told is go into corporate, whatever career, insert career here, go into corporate first, make money, do all, go into this life and just work for businesses. And then you can go do the humanitarian, service things, nonprofit things you want to do, but you have to start with that base. And I think for a lot of us, there's that fear of will we get sucked into that corporate life, never be able to leave it, you know? So how do you like combat that and still strike that balance?
Yes, very good question. And this could come from a lot of influences. It could be from your family. Oh, I want you to be a doctor and engineer. We hear that a lot in the Muslim communities, right? Doctor, engineer, lawyer. Not much more of that. Are people pushing people to go into the field of education? Teachers? Are they saying, come on, you know, go in, what's wrong with you? Go be a teacher, even though the salary's not that great and it's one of the most important jobs around. Are people pushing people to go into media, investigative journalism, whatever it might be, you know, all these other fields? You can name any fields, earth sciences, whatever. No, people are kind of like, societies are like, well, doctors, engineers, and lawyers. And one thing we have to recognize is that in a lot of the societies that, okay, the American Muslim community is kind of half and half. Half African-American communities coming out of the Worth Deen movement and other Sunni groups that developed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then another large portion are immigrant communities. Those who have come from immigrant families, they came from countries where to really succeed, you had to be the top of your class, the top of this, the top. And to really pull yourself out of poverty, you had to go into those fields of medicine, engineering, and so forth. And I know stories like that. My father, Allah yarhamu, God rest his soul, pulled himself out of poverty by going into engineering, even though he wanted to go into Sharia studies. But he saw that in his country at the time, that was the quickest way to pull himself and help his family come out of poverty. So now, what I would say is that anybody giving you advice, look at what their reasoning is. Like, why would they say go into the corporate world? Why would they say go into medicine or go into this field or that field? Are they saying it for financial security? Because really, if you want happiness in life, and there's been studies done on this, where does the income and your happiness, where does it max out? Does anybody happen to know? What's that? $75,000. That's where it maxes out. So they've done research on people who make 500,000, 5 million, 10 million, people who have made 7,000. They realize that income as it relates to happiness maxes out at about 75. And I would say, at least in California, and especially the Bay Area, 75 has probably got to be pushed up a little bit, you know, because now in Santa Clara County, you can be making $90,000 a year and get food stamps. San Francisco, I think it's 110. But the point is that and the biggest jump is from 0 to 10K in the U.S., 0 to 10K. Because what does that do at that point? There's places in the U.S. where you can rent a house or an apartment for $200, $300, $400. And so if you're making $10,000, $12,000 a year, you're not living well, but you're not on the streets. And so the main thing about income is just so that you have enough, you're sufficient. So there's 3 levels. There's poverty, there's you're sufficient, and there's wealth, where you have plenty of extra wealth. The Prophet ﷺ used to make dua that his people have sufficiency, not poverty and not extreme wealth, but they're sufficient. So in terms of being happy, just remember, your income is not going to make you happy. What's the difference? The difference is, are you passionate about what you do? Or that extra income beyond the 70 or 75,000, are you using it for things that make that cause you happiness, helping the people, building communities, helping other organizations and so forth, or other causes. So what I would say is that the idea of going into the corporate world, make your money, and then you can give back to the community, for some people, that might be the way. But don't let anybody push you into any one way or the other. Be practical. Choose your career you're not going to be in a situation where you're in need. You don't want to be in poverty, because at that point you can't help other people. But you also don't want to make your main focus, I got to get money, because that's not where happiness comes in. There's some of the wealthiest people, the most famous people we see. Were they happy? Did it bring them happiness? I mean, I don't follow a lot of the celebrity news, but you know, does it look like the celebrities when they get all that money? Do they look like they're happy? One of the best, or look at some of the best musical talent of the last 50 years. Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Whitney Houston, some of the best humor. Robin Williams, did their fame bring them happiness? It didn't. There was other things in their lives, and I understand, there's the element of mental illness, and they don't have control in some of those situations. But the point is, they got money, they got fame, they got the recognition. That didn't bring them happiness. So there's other things that we have to be thinking about. And yes, some people's route is make yourself established and then give back. But what I would say, and I'm just going to end on this, is that don't go on that path at the sacrifice of what you really want to do in life. Like if somebody has a passion for one area and they can align their passion with, I think I can make an income and support my family, even if it's not being a doctor, engineer, being in the corporate world or whatever. But mom or dad, I think I can do this. There's some things where you can't quit your day job. A lot of famous actors and musicians, before they went into that, because it's very difficult to break into the music and acting field, they had their day job. They relied on their day job until their dream could be fulfilled. So what I would say is that if you have a dream and it's practical and you can do something to support yourself and your family, go for it, even if everybody around you is telling you, no, you need to go through these other routes. So take people's consultation, be serious about the consultation, but then make your own decision. We have 5 minutes for questions.
So you mentioned we have to control our if we control our desires, we can channel it to do good. 1, how do we control our desires? 2, how do we maintain it? Like, how do we keep our intentions pure?
Okay, good, very good question. How do we control our desires? The main thing for us as Muslims is we have a guidance. We have a guidance, and it's the Quran and the Sunnah, the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those two together, through the understanding of the scholars, that's what the Sharia is. And the Sharia is what brings us balance in life. It's not, it's not this scary word like Sharia law. There's creeping Sharia. Are they practicing Sharia? There's probably people. We were in ISNA a couple of months ago in September. We got onto the elevator, and this guy gets on. He's got a baseball. This is in Texas, so I'm just setting the scene for you. Texas. He gets on. He's on his phone. He's like, "Hello," and I thought he said hello to the people in the elevator. Myself, and there was my wife, my daughter. They're wearing hijab. This other lady, she's wearing hijab. She has her 2 kids. My kids. It's like a family event. And I thought like, oh, you're being courteous, right? Oh, hello, yeah. And then he started, yeah, I don't know, some conference. I think it's like some ISIS conference. And I said, then I told him, I said, it's not an ISIS conference. Like, what do you, I said, the majority of terrorism in this country is perpetrated by who? White Christians. And so I'm holding the door open. The security, one of the security people from the hotel actually be there, and I was holding the door open. I said, "What are you talking about, ISIS? You don't even know what terrorism is and what." And we're going back, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever." But they're, because they've been fed this fear of Sharia and this like idea that Sharia is something bad, and it's not. I went to one time. I was giving a talk at a AP government at Cal High. Any Cal High from the San Ramon area? Cal High. Okay, I was at Cal High in San Ramon, and it was an AP government class, and they were studying multiple government systems, and then they came to Sharia governments, and then they asked me to come in to speak about Islam and about Sharia, and I said, in my opinion, those countries that claim Sharia, to follow Sharia, they're not. Saudi Arabia is not following Sharia. Iran is not following Sharia. I've studied it for 20 years of my life. I know what Sharia is and what it's not, and I know when it's being misused. So then they said, well, which country do you think might be following Sharia? I said, well, you have to understand, Sharia is not like the hudud, the penal codes and punishments. Sharia is a balanced way of life. It's personal law. When you got up this morning to do wudu and to pray fajr, that's Sharia. When you respected your fellows, that's Sharia. When you go to the gas pump and you see that it's being weights, there's the Department of Weights and Measure, that's Sharia law. So I said, there's a lot of things that are here in America that are actually congruent with Sharia law. They just don't call them Sharia law. So Sharia is really the law and the way that we govern our lives. So the way to maintain that balance, back and answer to your question about how do we make sure that our desires are balanced, is that we have to make sure that our life is in line with the Quran and Sunnah. The way to do that is to have a proper dedicated study of our faith and our practice. having connection to people who have studied it at a deeper level, going back to them with questions, asking advice, and then getting multiple opinions as well. And then once you collect those opinions, like if you get your advice from family and friends, you should do this. And then you go to the scholars and you ask them then you've done that counsel, and at the end of the day, you will make that decision. You will be the one who makes that decision. So you have to make an informed decision after seeking consultation and understanding what the position of Islam is on that matter, especially if there's multiple positions, and then you have to be the one who makes that decision at that time. And then in terms of keeping your intentions pure, there's a lot that can be said. We could probably have an entire conference just on that, and I know we have to end. What I would close about keeping the intention pure is stay around other people who are good. And if you have good friends and good companions, they will check your intentions, especially if they don't mind. There's nothing preventing them from calling you out, right? And they'll call you out if you're doing something. So keep good companions, and they will help you keep your intentions pure. Make dua. Always be in a state where you're calling on Allah to keep your intentions pure. Review your intentions daily. Review your actions daily. That's actually a spiritual process that's taken directly from the Sunnah. It's called muhasaba. So at the beginning of the day, you actually give yourself conditions, like on this day, these are my goals for the day. And throughout the day, you struggle to maintain those goals. And at the end of the day, you take an account. So after Isha, when everything's settled down, just take a few moments, a few minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it might be, to reflect. Okay, how was my devotion today? How was my ibadah? When I went to prayer, what was my intention? When I interacted with those people, and just constantly be critical of yourself, but not so critical that you put yourself into despair or depression and you're overcritical. Give yourself a pat on the shoulder for what deserves to be, but have that daily reflections of what you're doing. I think that ends the time that was allotted, 10:25. Jazakumullahu khair.